fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
Alabaster Station's docking bay smelled of ozone and fear, the metallic tang clinging to the back of my throat like a thin veil of rust. The hum of the grav relinquished engines vibrated through the concrete floor, sending a low tremor up through my boots. I could feel the weight of 100 eyes, human, alien, and something in between, pressing on me, each glance a needle of expectation. Lysander's shoulder brushed mine deliberately, a friction that stole my breath and ignited a slow, insistent burn across my skin. His dark coat brushed against my sleeve, the fabric whispering against his leather. He leaned in close enough that I could taste the faint copper of his breath, and his smirk promised delicious ruin. "You always find a way to make the impossible feel inevitable," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate the very air between us. Mars's palm slammed through the thin fabric of my sleeve, his rough fingers tightening possessively around my wrist. The pressure sent a tremor down my spine, a shiver that was both warning and invitation. "You didn't tell them about the nukes?" he asked, his accusation a low rasp thick with unspoken consequences. The words hung in the stale air, heavy as lead, and I swallowed, the dryness in my mouth mirroring the desert of my courage. Sapa moved ahead, a predator in tactical gear, the NIM-9C missiles strapped to his back gleaming like forbidden fruit. He was a silhouette of efficiency, his visor reflecting the flickering lights of the bay. The Qui'ztar admirals watched from their elevated perch, their crimson eyes dissecting us with a clinical curiosity. 500 warheads hung in the balance between salvation and annihilation, each one a promise of either redemption or ruin. The weight of their scrutiny pressed down on me, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother the thin thread of resolve I clung to. Lysander's lips brushed my ear, his voice a dark caress that sent a ripple of heat across my cheek. "Ever seen a black rose, little bird?" he whispered, his breath warm against the curve of my lobe. I imagined the secret gardens that writhed beneath the station, vines choking the steel, a perverse beauty blooming in the darkness. The rose's velvet petals, cool against my skin, felt like a lover's hesitant touch, each thorn a reminder that beauty could be dangerous. "Engineered for Mars," Lysander murmured, his hand sliding to the small of my back, the pressure of his fingers branding a spark of electricity through me. "They thrive in radiation." Mars's stubble scraped my wrist as he laughed, a rumble that resonated deep within my core. "Just like us," he said, his tone half joking, half serious. The comparison sent a shiver through me, a dangerous acknowledgement of the secrets we shared, the risks we embraced. I could feel the pulse of his heart against my skin, a steady drum that matched the frantic rhythm of my own. The stone marker at the far end of the bay bore my mother's name, etched in a script that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. It was a chilling reminder of the legacy I'd inherited, a lineage of beauty and curse intertwined. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing I carried not only her elegance but also the darkness that had haunted our family for generations. Lysander's touch burned through my shirt, the heat of his palm leaving a faint imprint that read, "Sabine made beauty from chaos." The words were a promise and a warning, a reminder that every act of creation carried a seed of destruction. Mars's teeth gently nipped the pulse point in my throat, a possessive claim that made my breath hitch. A wave of heat washed over me, and I leaned into his touch, my own desire a dangerous bloom. He tasted of smoke and something wild, something untamed that reminded me of the desert storms on the outer colonies. My fingers tangled in his hair, the coarse strands slipping through my grasp as I whispered, "Show me." The bay doors hissed open, spilling a thin veil of cold vacuum into the warm interior. Outside, the stars glittered like shards of broken glass, each one a silent witness to the drama unfolding below. The air shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of ionized particles and the distant echo of distant warships. I felt the pull of the unknown, a magnetic force that tugged at the edges of my resolve. "We have minutes, not seconds," Lysander said, his eyes flicking to the control panel where a cascade of red lights pulsed like a wounded heart. "The Admiral wants the nukes secured, the Council wants them destroyed. We're caught in the middle, and the only thing that can cut through this mess is us." Mars stepped forward, his boots thudding against the metal floor with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "You think we can trust each other?" he asked, his tone edged with sarcasm. "We've all got our own agendas." I swallowed again, feeling the dry sand of my throat shift as I searched for words. "We're not here for power," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're here because the station can't survive the fallout. If we don't act, everyone dies, soldiers, civilians, even the Qui'ztar." Lysander's eyes softened for a heartbeat, a flicker of something almost tender breaking through his hardened exterior. "You always were the idealist," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips, "but idealism doesn't keep you alive when the hull is about to breach." The station shuddered, a low groan reverberating through the bay as a distant explosion rattled the outer hull. Dust fell from the ceiling, tiny specks of metal glittering like fireflies in the dim light. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a drum of urgency. "We need to get to the core," Mars shouted over the noise, gesturing toward the spiral staircase that led down into the bowels of the station. "The nukes are stored in the sublevel, behind the reactor shield. If we can reroute the power, we can overload the containment and force a controlled detonation." Lysander nodded, his hand finding mine once more. The contact was electric, a jolt that traveled up my arm and settled in my chest. "You'll come with us?" he asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I hesitated, the memory of my mother's stone marker flashing before my eyes. Her name, Sabine, whispered through the corridors of my mind, a reminder of the sacrifices she had made. I thought of the black roses, the engineered beauty that thrived in radiation, and the promise they held for a new world. "Yes," I said finally, the word tasting like iron on my tongue. "I'm coming." The three of us descended the staircase, the walls narrowing around us, the air growing colder with each step. The lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the metal surfaces. I could hear the distant hum of the reactor, a low, steady thrum that seemed to pulse in time with my own heartbeat. When we reached the sublevel, the doors to the armory loomed ahead, sealed with a biometric lock that glowed a sickly green. Lysander placed his palm on the scanner, his eyes closing as he whispered an encrypted code. The lock clicked and the doors swung open with a hiss, revealing rows upon rows of sleek cylindrical containers, each one humming with dormant power. Mars moved with practiced efficiency, his fingers dancing over the control panels, rerouting power lines and overriding safety protocols. "We have to be quick," he warned, his voice barely audible over the rising whine of the reactor. "If the containment fails, the blast radius will be catastrophic," Lysander finished, his eyes never leaving the array of nukes. "But if we can channel the energy into the core, we might be able to create a singularity that stabilizes the station." I felt a surge of adrenaline, the fear that had been a desert now a storm raging inside me. I stepped forward, my hand hovering over the central console. The screen displayed a cascade of numbers, each one a countdown to an unknown fate. "Sabine would have wanted us to try," I whispered, the memory of my mother's voice echoing in my mind. "She believed in turning chaos into something beautiful." Lysander's hand slipped around my waist, his fingers tightening in a possessive grip that both comforted and threatened. "Then let's make this chaos beautiful," he said, his breath hot against my ear. Mars's laugh rang out, a low, resonant sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the station. "You two are ridiculous," he said, but there was a glint of admiration in his eyes. "But I guess that's what we need, some reckless love in the middle of a war." The countdown began, numbers flickered across the screen. 10-9-8, the air grew thick with the scent of ozone, the metallic taste returning to my mouth. I could feel the heat building, a pressure that seemed to push against my ribs as if the station itself were inhaling. "Now," Lysander shouted, his voice cutting through the rising tension. Mars slammed his palm onto the activation switch, and the reactors roared to life. A blinding flash of white light erupted from the core, illuminating the armory in a surreal glow. The black roses that grew in the hidden gardens outside the station seemed to pulse, their petals unfurling in a silent, otherworldly dance. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the station shuddered, a deep, resonant vibration that traveled through the metal, through my bones, through my very soul. The walls trembled, and a low, mournful wail echoed through the corridors, a sound that felt like a lament for all the lives lost and all the futures yet to be written. When the tremor subsided, a new calm settled over us. The reactor's glow had softened, its fury tamed into a steady, amber hum. The black roses outside the bay glimmered with a strange, iridescent sheen, as if they had absorbed the energy of the explosion and transformed it into something new. Lysander pulled me close, his body warm against mine, his breath still hot on my skin. "We did it," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and relief. Mars clapped a hand on my shoulder, his grin wide and genuine. Looks like the universe finally gave us a chance to rewrite the story, he said, his eyes scanning the horizon where the stars now seemed brighter, more hopeful. I looked up at the stone marker bearing my mother's name, the letters now illuminated by the soft glow of the reactor. Sabine's legacy was no longer a curse, it was a promise that even in the darkest of times, beauty could be forged from chaos. We're not finished yet, I said, my voice steady, the fear replaced by a fierce determination. There are still warships on the horizon, still enemies who think they can control us, but we have something they'll never understand, love, and the willingness to risk everything for it. Lysander's hand slipped to the small of my back once more, his fingers tracing a line that sent another jolt of electricity through me. Then let's make sure they remember us, he said, his eyes blazing with a fire that matched the black roses outside. Mars nodded, his stance firm. We'll take the fight to them. We'll turn this station into a beacon, a lighthouse in the void, and anyone who tries to snuff it out will learn the hard way that we're not just survivors, we're creators. The three of us stood together in the dim light of the armory, the hum of the reactor a steady heartbeat beneath our feet. The future stretched out before us, a tapestry of stars, war, and possibility. I felt the weight of my mother's name, the scent of ozone, the taste of metal, and the lingering warmth of Lysander's touch. In that moment, I understood that the black roses were not just a symbol of engineered beauty. They were a reminder that even in radiation, in war, in the darkest corners of the universe, love could take root and bloom. Show me, I whispered again, this time not as a plea, but as a promise. Lysander smiled, his eyes softening. Always, he replied, and together we stepped out of the armory, ready to face whatever lay beyond the horizon, our hearts beating in unison with the pulse of the station itself.